You know, you can only distract yourself for so long. Oftentimes we go through some really challenging times where we suffer far more than we'd ever like to, where the struggle just increases, where it feels like maybe it's just a bit unbearable. Like you could just, flip a switch and cut it all off. You would do it in a heartbeat. I think a lot of us instinctually would rather distract ourselves than face whatever it is that we're trying to avoid. It's like we take it and then we stuff it in a dark corner just for the time to run out for that distraction that we're using to escape, just for it to come back even stronger. It's like the pain was waiting on us. It's just sitting there waiting for the right moment, waiting for the time to come up. But we never really take the time to analyze, like, either why it's happening or, what is the lesson that we can extract from this? Or, how can I prevent this for the next time? Because there's always a light and a dark side, as we all know. But sometimes we don't really ever want to look at the light, because it just feels so painful, and it's like you can't focus on anything else. Maybe typically on the more optimistic side, but then it's just easier to be pessimistic. Especially when everything is piling on all at once. It's so much easier just to be negative, to have that kind of mindset. It's easier to be negative in general, as it is. It takes no effort. The effort is in being positive. The effort is in the optimism. And that's exactly why it's more rewarding to be optimistic and positive. You never get anything good from a negative mindset. It's just not how it works. So eventually we're gonna have to face the pain. Eventually we're gonna have to find out what the source is, what we can do about it, what the lesson is, so that we can implement and prevent. We have to take some action. We don't have all the time in the world. There's obviously a reason for us to be going through whatever it is we're going through. All of the pain is unescapable. There's a day that awaits all of us that yields more pain and suffering than any other day that we could possibly imagine compared to today. So it's up to us to decide whether or not we want to use these moments up until that point to actually strengthen ourselves, to actually prepare ourselves, or to not. And when that day comes for all of us, it's like we either are gonna crumble or we're gonna flex our muscles that we developed leading up to that point. We're gonna come across a lot of really challenging days, and there's gonna be probably more times than not that you don't want to do what you should do. And to be honest, I didn't want to record this video. I didn't know what I was going to talk about. It's easier to just stop and not get on here and press record. It's like you're flipping a coin, whether you're going to be just sitting here talking to yourself or whether you're going to be actually able to impact someone. You know, you never know. But it's bigger than just the numbers, you know, and it's bigger than just me. You know, none of that number stuff matters. None of the stuff of whether or not people actually see it matters. You know, whether or not I feel like I need to keep doing this or whether I actually want to continue to streak, it doesn't matter, you know, because there's going to be a point in time where we don't feel the way that we're feeling today, the feeling that we will use as an excuse to not do the thing. There's going to be a day that comes where we don't feel that feeling anymore, and we can either look back and be glad, you know, about all the progress we made and be glad about the fact that we stayed the course, or we can look back and feel regret because we let something get in the way, you know, something that wasn't even that important if we look back in hindsight, you know. But I don't want to get on here and talk for too long. If you see this and you watch this and you got to this point, I greatly appreciate you, because you didn't have to, you know, you didn't have to take 6 minutes, 7 minutes out of your day. So I appreciate you, and then perhaps I'll see you in the next video. Hope we're gonna be recording another one tomorrow to keep the streak going. So now that I said it, I gotta do it. So I'll see you there. Adios for now.